Appeals. And we're excited to have a great agenda tonight that Mr. Evans put together for us. I'm going to introduce everybody up here on the dais. To my far left and your right, if you're watching at home or you're here in the audience, is Mr. Bossenbrook, who is our newest member of the zoning board. And then this is Vice Chairman Agawes. I'm Glenn, and he's the Vice Chairman. And I'm Glenn Clark. I am the Chairman of the board. And over here is Mr. Eisenbacher. That's your name, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Mr. Desmond. And then this is Mr. McCauley at the end of the table. And on the side is Mr. Evans. And then that is Mr. Agawes. Mr. Evans, by the way, is with the planning department.
Mr. Agawes. I'm everywhere.
I'm sorry, Motsney, but I'll get to that in a second. Mr. Evans is with the planning department for the city of Troy, and he serves as our staff director here on the board. And then, of course, Mr. Motsney is an assistant city attorney with the attorney's office here in the city of Troy's city attorney's office. And without any further ado, I'm going to ask our Vice Chairman Agawes to read our rules and procedures. We do have rules and procedures to guide us, and then that also pertains to people who want to address us as well. So Vice Chairman Agawes.
Chairman Clark?
Yes, Mr.
Should we do a roll call first? Yeah. Just following the agenda.
Okay, sure, let's do it.
Okay. Mr. Clark?
I'm here.
Mr. Agawes?
Here.
Mr. Desmond?
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Here.
Mr. McCauley?
Here.
Ms. Cruz? Mr. Bossenbrook?
Here.
Ms. Cruz announced to us that she was at a conflict at the last minute, so she's not going to be able to be here tonight. So Vice Chairman Agawes is going to give us our rules and procedures.
The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, such as next door neighbor, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Agawes. Mr. Evans, you're right. I just looked at the agenda. I always thought the procedures were before the roll call, but I guess you have to look at the agenda. So with that, we have the August 20th minutes to be considered. And is there a question, concern, or motion to be made by a member?
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Mr. Desmond moves and Mr. McCauley seconds for approval of those minutes from August. Are there, Mr. Evans?
I do have a comment.
Sure.
Item number 5, hearing of case. I rewatched the video and Mr. Kaltsunis voted no. Everyone else voted yes. So I would request that perhaps the motion be restated, seconded with that proposed change.
I second that with the correction of Mr. Kaltsunis voting no.
You can't second something that Mr. Evans does. You can move.
can amend the motion?
Yes.
I'll amend the motion that we approve the minutes with the correction of Mr. Calzunas voting no.
Okay.
Does that need to be seconded?
Yes.
Well, then I second that.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to change the minutes to reflect those comments that we just heard on public comment, from the board members. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes with the correction that Mr. McCauley and Mr. Desmond just created?
This is an approval is yes.
Yes. Approval would be yes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So that is approved. And we move on to approval of the agenda, item number 4. Are there any questions, concerns, or comments about the agenda that was presented to us in our packet, and it's at the board table right now? Seeing none, we can just move forward because I don't think that requires a motion.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we move right into item 5A, which is a variance request related to 2130 Dalesford. Mr. Evans, could you please present to us on this matter?
Right, and this subject property is in a residential area on the north side of Dalesford, and that neighborhood is at the northwest corner of Square Lake and Coolidge. And I've got it outlined here in yellow, and all subject property and all the surrounding property that you see in this slide is used and zoned single-family residential. This is a close-up of the property as it looks now, and the subject matter involves a proposed detached accessory building to go in approximately this red area here. The applicant has given the board a design of the proposed structure and an additional site plan showing exactly where the structure is going to go in the side yard. Now, the zoning ordinance does not allow detached accessory buildings except in the rear yard. So that would be any area north of the north building line from one side of the property to the other. So in order to proceed with his request, he's seeking relief to place that detached structure in the side yard. Turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Any questions for city staff? Mr. McCauley?
I'm looking at that picture, and I also saw in the photos that he submitted that there's a small accessory building currently in the back of the property. Do our ordinances allow for 2 accessory buildings?
Yes, it allows for more than one, but there is a aggregate square footage cap on them.
Does it meet that cap?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure.
Anyone else? Hello, Mr. Green. Mr. Evans, can Mr. Green sit?
I don't see why not.
No reason he could not. We need
Sure.
We need a 7th member.
Did you just hear through the grapevine that someone wasn't going to show up tonight? Welcome. This is Mr. Green. He's an alternate appointed by City Council, and so he can sit as a full voting member. So, so we have a full board tonight, which is great. So we'll call forward the petitioner. This is the petitioner present, Mr. McMillan. I am. That's you. Yes, sir. Just identify yourself at the microphone for the full public record.
I'm Michael McMillan, current owner of 2130 Dalesford.
Okay. Do you want to address us on this matter?
Yes, I would like to. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before the chairman and the board to request a variance for placing a shed in my side yard as opposed to the rear yard. Did anybody have a chance or an opportunity to visit the property over the past month since I made my application? I see a couple of nods, so that's good. I don't want to bore the board with too much details. I can be very verbose at times, so I'll try to keep it short. The essential characteristics of my piece of property, thank you, Paul, if you could leave that slide up, make it very difficult, if not impossible to build anywhere other than the side yard of the property. The shading in the red, there's also a topographical map further on in this PDF, but the shading in the red, that entire area is heavily sloped. I believe there is upwards of a 20-foot grade from the street up to the side of my particular house. So building on the north side of the house would be, or sorry, that's not the north side, the east side of the house would be quite literally not possible. That area is also very heavily wooded with dozens of mature trees and natural space. The entire rear of the property, as you can see from this photo, it's actually outlined very well. There's very little in the rear lot that is not natural wooded area. And being that we are so close to the Stage Nature Center, there is a lot of wildlife that comes through our yard. Lots of deer families, lots of geese, lots of turkeys. And we greatly appreciate that. It's part of the attraction that brought me to this neighborhood. Building that backyard would disrupt natural walkways for a lot of the wildlife in the area that I personally would like to avoid doing. I know that we're not supposed to have a personal nature on there, but that one's very important to me and my family to not disrupt the wildlife that's in the area. The other exception on the property is this property was built before sewer was installed into this particular subdivision. So this parcel is on a septic field, and the septic field sits in that west lot, or that west side of the house. So with the septic field being over there, we cannot build either on it, nor can we put a driveway over it, as if you're familiar with septic fields, they can't take that kind of weight, and it would be destructive to the septic field. So building there, we would have to gut the septic field, tie into the city sewer systems, which would be obviously incredibly expensive and not worth the cost to put in a 10 by 24 shed for some garden equipment and lawnmowers and such. That's the basic gist of it, and really I think I am here mostly to answer any questions that the board or the chairman may have. And I humbly ask for a variance to allow me to place this shed in that area to allow me to maintain my property to the high standards of the Charnwood Hills subdivision.
Thank you. Any questions for this petitioner? Yes, Mr. McGaugh.
You are not planning on cutting any trees, just some shrub areas, low-lying?
Correct. And I would like to point out that that location is the only location on that lot where I will not have to fell trees. If I put it anywhere in the rear yard, large mature trees will need to be felled to place a shed back there, without doubt. There's nowhere that does not have one. But that particular area, just shrubbery.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other member? Yes, sir.
Going back to that photo, the proposed location, does that still encroach on that septic area?
I put this Excel together myself, and the answer to that is no. The actual septic, the shed will come up to the edge of the septic field and will fit within the side yard without encroaching on the 6-foot, I'm forgetting the term, but the 6-foot variance from the sideline of the property, the setback, yeah. It does fit within the setback and where the field actually ends. Imagery on that's not perfect, I apologize.
And what were you going to propose to put in there? In your packet, I think you said maybe like a trailer or?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be essentially it's a gardening shed, but it has to be large enough to house a trailer, my lawn equipment, and all my various lawn tools, power washer, snow blowers, snow plow, all that good stuff.
And I think I have one more question. And then I think you represented in your petition that your neighbor to the west had no objection to the positioning of this proposed shed?
Correct. I don't have it in writing from her. We've actually been on vacation for 2 weeks out of the last month, and I have not had a chance to connect with her. I can get a letter from her in writing to present to the board. I did still want to make my request today, as the window to pour cement in 2019 is rapidly closing. But I do have verbal confirmation from her that she does not have any concern. Her only concern with the shed in the side yard, she actually has a neighbor on the other side of her house that she was unhappy with a shed that is not technically in his side yard. It is in his backyard, but he allowed it to degrade to a point that it is unsightly. The shed that we're proposing, there is enough undergrowth that she will not see it. At best, she might see some of the roof of the shed, but the undergrowth in that area is so tall, it's 12 to 14 feet tall by itself, and we will not be clearing it all the way to her property line. We'll only be clearing it for that shed and leaving that growth in its space.
Anything else, Mr. Bosenberg?
Oh, thank you.
So, Mr. Evans, I just have a quick question while this petitioner's in front of us. So what is the proposed shed? How is it situated to the property line? How many feet?
Well, it's got to be 6 feet off the side property line.
Is that your understanding, sir?
Yes.
It's 6 feet.
6 feet at least, and I doubt it will even become within 6 feet. The grid on here, each one of those squares is 1 foot if you were to actually plot out my entire parcel. And I believe we have an 8-foot variance for where that shed sits right now, so there's more than enough space to.
You don't have a variance.
Sorry, not a variance.
Please, don't use that phraseology.
Improper
We provide the
term.
variances here.
We have an 8-foot setback from where that shed is going to sit currently from the property line, which gives us 2 feet of leeway for the
But you're
6 foot
encroaching into that.
No, we will not be within the 6-foot setback from the side lot line. We'll be 8 feet from that side lot line.
What the code says, Mr. Clark, if I may,
Yes.
is that accessory structures cannot be in the side yard
Right.
at all. So, for example, I'll just draw an imaginary line to illustrate for, there we go.
And this neighbor was notified by a postcard,
Yes,
correct?
everyone within 300 feet of the subject
Right.
property. So this imaginary red line, everything north of that is the rear yard. So the code says that this proposed structure needs to be north of this imaginary red line. And it also says that you need to be 6 feet from the side and rear property lines. So that's where the setback comment comes from, is detached accessory structures need to be 6 feet away from the property lines.
Mr. McCauley?
So for clarity, his setback to the side is within our zoning ordinances, and we're just looking at relief from the backyard versus the side yard.
Right.
So if he put it there, then the only thing that we need to decide on is if we allow it in the side yard opposed to the backyard.
Anyone else for this petitioner? Okay, if you could have a seat, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Bring it back to the board for any discussion, questions, comments, discussion with staff.
Well, I did drive past this property, and everything around it is thoroughly wooded. I mean, there's, the whole plot is wooded except for that area, and even that area, as far as the neighbor that would notice it or care is concerned, that area is wooded too. I mean, it's basically fully wrapped in woods. If I was the homeowner or I was one of the neighbors, I would be far more irritated to have a shed sitting back there in the nature than I would have it off to the side, which is still obscured from the road anyway. I mean, I get the point of this idea where you can't have accessory structures in the side yard, but it doesn't seem like it fits within this particular neighborhood just driving through it, because the way the neighborhood's laid out, it doesn't seem like a regular platted neighborhood. I mean, it is, but like the actual parcels are not just shoebox lots. At least from my aesthetic perspective, I would much prefer, even as a neighbor, that shed not be obscuring the woods, and it'd be basically where he put it. I didn't really see too many spaces that would make any kind of sense to have that other than where he's proposing it. So I don't see an issue with this lot. There's certain sections like where the grade slopes, I mean, it is unbuildable. Like, it's not, I don't want to say it's unbuildable, it's not as easily built. And I think it would look out of place nearly any other part of the lot than where he's proposing. So I personally see this is kind of a weird lot. I see it as irregular. I see meeting with the look of the neighborhood. I mean, other houses have, I've seen a couple sheds that were in side yards. I don't know if they were officially done or if they were just, you know, put up next to the house, but I mean, there was a few other things in the yard that wouldn't have looked too out. I would have noticed it if this wasn't in front of us and I was driving down the street in that neighborhood. So just my 2 cents. I don't see an issue here, but.
Thank you. Mr. Eisenbacher?
I agree with everything that was just stated, and I'd like to move the resolution, or move a resolution for approval of placement of the shed in the side yard, because this meets all 5 of our criteria very clearly. A, the topography of the land precludes moving the house any closer. B, it is this property. C, it's not a personal nature for the characteristic that makes compliance difficult. It's the slope of the land, it's the placement of the house, it's the woods. D, characteristic which makes compliance with dimensional requirements difficult must not have been created by the current or the previous owner. He didn't place the woods, he didn't place the slope of the land. And E, it is very clearly a matter of you would have to cut down trees and impair the character of the neighborhood by doing what the zoning ordinance requires, and it would impair surrounding properties, specifically the nature center, by placing the shed in the backyard. So I would like to move it as for the variance.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to give the second to Vice Chairman Nagawis, and then we're going to go to Mr. Monsky first, and then Mr. Evans.
I think we both have the same comment. We need to open up it for
No.
public hearing before voting on the motion.
Public comment first.
Right. Yeah, you kind of jumped the gun, but I sometimes do that too, so that's okay.
Oh,
Very
thought we brought
excited
it
about
back
it
to
all.
the table.
So at this point in time, we're going to open the public hearing. So if somebody would like to address the board on this matter, please come forward to the podium and address the board. You'll be recognized. Seeing there's just a multitude of people running forward, we will keep the public hearing open yet again for another call. For public comment, if you want to address the board, come to the podium and be recognized. Seeing that there isn't anyone, that's closed. So we have an Eisenbacher-Agawis motion for approval.
Second?
It's already been seconded. But let's just, because it was before public hearing,
I'll remake
just,
my motion.
yes, for approval.
Yes, for approval.
And Vice Chairman Agawis is moving for a second for approval as well, for the items that were already identified. Any comment from the board? Discussion, dialogue? Mr. Green?
Just additional support for that. The character of the area, as mentioned, includes the nature center and the neighbors, and you have selected an area that is heavily wooded and well covered, and that allows for continuation of the natural wildlife in the area, and to disrupt that with something like a shed is, as you said, it's bad for both the nature center and the animals, the surrounding neighbors. That breaks up the area, and having a shed back in an area that is more wooded is more likely to cause it to fall down or degrade more quickly, which is going to actually lead to bad character and degrade of the property and potentially surrounding properties. So that's, I see this as all 5 easy. Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. McCauley.
Yes.
Mr. Bossenbrook.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Agawis.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Congratulations, you have your variance. Thank you. Appreciate it. Very good. No, you can't, yeah. Your time at the microphone has ended, so have a very good night. Item number B, 5B, related to 1025 Larchwood. Mr. Evans, could you please present to us?
Yes, this involves enlarging an existing detached garage, and the subject property is on the north side of Larchwood. That's near where Rochester and Stevenson meet, and it's the neighborhood's east of Rochester. It's a single-family area with all the surrounding property in this slide zoned and used for single-family residential. And on this slide, 1025 Larchwood, the subject property, is outlined in yellow. There's a close-up of the property. Subject building that's supposed to be enlarged is this detached garage north of the house. And the applicant has provided this slide to kind of illustrate where the proposed addition is going to go. And then it's a close-up, even more specific as to the dimensions and how it's going to be situated relative to the existing building. The city ordinance regulates size of detached accessory structures. There's a base amount that everybody's allowed, plus 2% of the lot area, but there is a cap, and that cap is the ground floor footprint of the house. So if you add the first two figures together and it goes over the ground floor footprint, you don't get that. You actually get the ground floor footprint of the house. The ground floor footprint of the house is 900 square feet with the existing size of the garage, plus what's proposed. That's going to compute to 968 square feet. So he needs a 68 square foot variance from this board in order to proceed with what he plans on doing, and I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Any questions from city staff on this matter?
Mr. Evans, my confusion, maybe you can help with it, is the two different numbers. One was the 730 square feet allowable, one was the 900 square feet allowable. I read that section 7.03 a little differently, that you're allowed 450 square feet plus 2%, which in this case is 730 square feet. And then in no case could you go beyond the floor print of the building, which is 900. But are we really just measuring the variance compared to that 730? Is the 900 even relevant to the equation here?
Yeah, let me give that some thought.
You're right.
You may have asked the
I think you make a good
most
point.
difficult question of the evening here.
Because I read it as, in no case could it go beyond that footprint, but we're not even in that realm yet. We're still talking about the 730.
Yeah, and I'll just read it out loud here for everyone's sake. The combined floor area of all detached accessory buildings shall not exceed 450 square feet plus 2% of the total lot area. However, okay, gotcha. You know, you raise a good point, and now that I'm reading this, I would concur that yes, so he does need a variance from the 730,
238 square feet.
right, as opposed to the 900 cap. So then I have a question for our counsel, if I could, Mr. Clark.
Yes, Mr. Evans.
And since the notice indicated that the zoning ordinance limits the amount of floor area to be 900 square feet, can the board proceed tonight?
Probably not, I would say no.
Mr. Mazzi, can you speak up?
Yeah, I need to talk into the microphone. When the notice of variance is advertised, it is okay for this board to grant a lesser variance, but basically right now what's being indicated is there's actually a greater variance than what is being advertised, which the board cannot do. A board cannot grant a greater variance in the advertisement. So I think maybe a motion to postpone might be in order.
Is there a motion to postpone to the October meeting on this item? Mr. Desmond?
I move to postpone, please.
Second.
Mr. Green seconds.
May I ask for some clarification?
Is there discussion? Mr. Green?
Just for clarification, will the homeowner have to resubmit, or
No.
will this be just a clarification for that?
Postponement does not require any
Re-advertise.
resubmittal.
There'll be no additional work needed by the,
If the board acts in that capacity, if we deny and they have to refile, then they have to repay and resubmit and so forth. Any other discussion from the board on this postponement? Mr. Eisenbacher?
Okay, maybe I misunderstood what was just read, but I heard 450 square feet plus 2% of the lot area. Okay, looking at the plan, the lot is 165 by 40.
By 85, I think. It's
Sir,
85.
sir, you cannot speak from the chamber, sorry.
it is, we calculate it as 165 by 85.
Right. By 85, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yes, the math matches the submission now.
Any other discussion by a member of the board? Mr. McCauley?
So by a postponement, we just have to re-advertise this to fit correctly because it's a larger amount than what they did, but the applicant does not have to refile. It's just postponed and re-advertised.
Right, we're going to ask that the applicant, we're not going to ask the applicant to do anything different unless, of course, he chooses to do something different. Otherwise, the city will take care of all that. No additional expense or other action.
Any other member of the board? Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. McCauley?
So a yes is to postpone until
Yes.
October.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Bossenbrook?
Yes.
Mr. Agawas?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Motion carries. So this is going to be on our October agenda. So we'll see the applicant, if it's the applicant in the chamber, I'm not sure. We will see you back here in October. Moving right on to item number 6, communications. Mr. Evans,
I have none.
very good. Any other miscellaneous business by a member of the board or from Mr. Evans? Seeing none, we will move on to public comment. So if you are here to address the board on any item, you can speak at the microphone right now. And you have to identify yourself.
Yeah, this is Edward Fenwick. I'm the owner of 1025 Larchwood. I'm kind of confused here now. What are the figures that I need to?
That will be a conversation for Mr. Evans during normal business hours at the city office.
Okay,
We don't conduct city business here.
okay, all
We
right,
represent the public.
okay, all right.
So, yeah, you just have to call him tomorrow, or the next day, or the next day, whatever you want to do. So, yeah, or pop in his office, and he will be very happy to address you on that. Public comment is for you to share your thoughts to the board
In anything.
on anything, but it's not a question and answer session
Okay,
with city staff. This is not, we are not the city staff.
Pardon,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
I think the city staff wants to question it.
Mr. Evans.
No, and we're all set with Mr. Fenwick here, sir, but I'll have time this evening to meet with Mr. Fenwick, and I ask that he stay.
Yeah,
Sure.
perfect.
So you don't need to wait till
Sounds like Mr. Evans is
tomorrow.
going to make himself available
I'll
to you
make
tonight.
myself available
So
after
that's
the meeting. You bet.
Mr. Evans' business, but good for the both of you. So, very good. Anyone else who wants to address the board on any matter? Final call for public comment. Seeing there isn't any more, we close that out. And we are adjourned. We will see you.